Okay, so good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Hello and good afternoon or good night. Who knows when anyone will be watching this and or if anyone will. Though we know it's an important topic and why we, Simone and myself, are gathered here to talk about miscarriage and how we can identify potential, what's the word I'm looking, symptoms that can lead to miscarriage, as well as steps that we can take to avoid it. And I'm Kara H. Cadwallader. I'm the founder of 40 Days for 40 Years, which is all about tending to us mamas postpartum care, health and well-being, and all the many days that follow. So that definitely includes miscarriage, and it's an important topic to me because I've experienced 2 first-term pregnancy losses over these past 2 years. So I definitely bring to this conversation my own personal experience, and I'll share more about that. And I'll just speak into the place that I'm recording from here is my home, and it's also a gathering space for women and children, a recreation of a village space where we can thrive and grow, expand our sense of self and understanding of how to be parents in today's day and age, especially in this Me Too era, which Simone and I were just talking about consent and how subtle it can be and what that can look like. So I'm here at Mama's and Papa's Cooperative in Encinitas, and I'm really excited to be having this conversation with Simone. So Simone, I'll just turn it over to you to introduce yourself.
Awesome. Thanks, Kara. And I'm super excited to be here as well. I'm a doctor of Chinese medicine, and so that's my main lens of how I'm going to be offering some wisdom and some insight into miscarriage. And I think what you're doing, Kara, is so important. Definitely so needed in the transition because it's something I feel we just don't talk about very much. I think when we got inspired to do this Zoom, I stated 1 in 4 pregnancies ends in a miscarriage. And, I want to state that most of those are due because of the embryo not being viable. And I want to start that way because our bodies are so intelligent. And they really do know how to do this whole pregnancy thing. And when there's great alignment, it all flows, but not to discount the emotional piece of losing a baby. And I think that you do work around that as well, like rituals and healing practices, and just even talking about it can be so healing and, take off the stories of how we might feel betrayed or any shame around this process. And I think that's really, really cool.
Yeah.
And so, I own a center called Source Empowered Wellness, and we're a community acupuncture place. I treat hundreds of women for fertility issues and reproductive health in general. And what I love about the women that come to see me is that they're very committed to the process. And they are often okay with giving themselves about 3 months to kind of go into reset. When you have a miscarriage and you go to your doctor, he'll often say, well, come see me after the 3rd one, and then we'll see if there's an issue. And for me, it's like, wow, it would be great to do some testing to see if there's anything that we can prevent or maybe even work with to see and if we can boost the body in general. So as women, we're so, so lucky to have information from our cycles. And our cycles tell us about not only the amount of blood that's in our body, but also the quality of it, how it's moving through our body. And if you have painful cycles or light cycles or too heavy cycles, we want to have you come in for acupuncture and herbs and kind of regulate that first. And I usually tell people, 3 months is a great amount of time. So if you want, I can kind of segue that and go into the main 4 reasons why miscarriages happen.
Yeah, yeah, let me preface it. I'll just share a little bit of my personal experience with
Yes.
miscarriage. I definitely knew that I wanted to have a child, and I waited. I'm an older mama, if you can't tell by my gray hair. And so I waited and kind of called my son in, and at the time was only friends with my partner now. So I didn't know who Papa was, but I knew that this strong male energy wanted to come through me. And then Papa and I did become lovers. And well, I think it was like, honestly, that month and a half around when we conceived, I'd started seeing an acupuncturist. And it wasn't so much for fertility. It was more tending to, I can have symptoms of depletion, and they came to be associated with my monthly cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Really kind of diligently tending towards this, and it can look like dehydration, headaches, sometimes migraines. It could last as long as 3 days. So I started seeing an acupuncturist to tend to this, and then within a month I had conceived. And I wasn't really sure. My cycles had always been fairly normal, a little shorter in length, not a full 28-day cycle, about 25 days, but always very regular. And aside from symptoms of depletion, I wouldn't experience any other pain or discomfort like menstrual cramps. So I've always felt very comfortable with and enjoy my period. So then we conceived, and it seemed like a fairly easy process the first time around. It was like bing bang boom, 4 months, here we are. And,
Yeah.
we celebrated our first year anniversary together, and then we had our child the following month. So it seemed to work really easily. We kind of all expect our bodies to do. And I breastfed him, and breastfeeding is it really can take our toll, especially if your child likes to wake every 2 hours and doesn't sleep through the night. So my menstrual cycle did not come back until almost 2 years. It was about 18 months. I forget the exact timing, but it had been a while. Yeah. And it finally came back. And my partner and I, we've known that we want to have another child. We would like our son to have a sibling close in age. So we have been consciously trying for another. So my period came back, and then, I don't know, 4 or 5 months later, I found myself pregnant again. And this time, I was experiencing, I really enjoyed pregnancy the first time around, and it felt like kind of a breeze, it felt good in my body, no real discomfort. But this time around, I was experiencing morning sickness morning sickness comes in different types, right? It seems like we only hear about nausea in the morning, but I was actually experiencing extreme severe chills in the middle of the night, and followed by being extremely cold. Mm-hmm. And I realized, like, wow, this is my hormones, and my hormones were really off. And I did end up losing that embryo at about 7 weeks in. So I wanted to just preface that there are ways and indicators, which I'm sure you'll go into, Simone, that can tell us what's going on, especially with our hormones.
Okay. Yes, and thank you so much for sharing your experience. Did you see an acupuncturist after your first pregnancy, when you had that lapse of not having your cycle?
I don't think so.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to go into the 4 main causes of miscarriage, and touch on the hormonal piece at the end. Hey, buddy. I love your helmet. That's awesome. Because what you were experiencing there for your second pregnancy sounds a lot like blood deficiency to me. And maybe slight yin deficiency as well, which we can attribute to not having enough hormones in our body. Which ones, it's hard to say. It would be good to have had a hormone panel to know which specific ones. So as women, I think another thing that isn't mentioned is because we have cycles, we are losing blood every month. And so we are prone to a little bit of blood deficiency in Chinese medicine perspective. And that doesn't mean that you're anemic, but it may mean that we want to kind of juice up your body's ability to go with the flow, basically, and if you are having a more scanty cycle or are amenorrheic, that's a big sign that we need to build blood for you again. And while you're breastfeeding, the same fluids and constituents that are in blood are going to make your breast milk. So, as mama, you're kind of this source, this wellspring, and all of your resources are being used for baby. So definitely herbal medicine is awesome for that. We have a lot of herbs that are safe for lactation and can help build blood again. And I would always go to an acupuncturist or an herbalist to just make sure that you're getting a formula that's right for you, that's not going to cause any side effects or, depending if you have other medications or something like that. But yeah, I would say, if you are going towards 40 years old, it's very, very normal to have higher FSH levels and lower progesterone. And so one herb that's really helpful in general for fertility is called Vitex. And get yourself a really good brand of it. Gaia has one that's fairly reasonably priced and that's good quality that I would take. And about 900 to 2,000 milligrams a day. You might want to talk to your herbalist to see what's appropriate for you. If you have insulin-resistant PCOS, though, I wouldn't take Vitex because that can complicate things. And for anybody listening that doesn't know, PCOS is polycystic ovarian syndrome, and this can manifest as really like sharp, stabby kind of pains during ovulation or your cycle. You can have really heavy bleeding or longer bleeding, pelvic pain of all kinds, pains during sex. So those are some big symptoms to look for. So I hope that
is associated with PCOS, ovarian cysts. Are they associated with PCOS?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. And so kind of segueing, one of the major reasons why women have miscarriages are those hormonal imbalances. So I would get a hormone panel done. Another underdiagnosed thing is thyroid issues. If you feel cold all the time and you feel like your metabolism is kind of sluggish, or you kind of have like empty-headed syndrome, or like, you feel like your head just cannot think, there's this mental fog around you all the time, that might be a little bit of a hypothyroid situation. Or if you feel kind of restless and you need, you're kind of on the go and you're almost losing weight, you could be going towards hyperthyroid. But sometimes those scales are so, like you might only be a little bit hypo or a little bit hyper. And for those cases, we have really, really awesome success with acupuncture and herbs. So I would try natural herbs first before you get on something like levothyroxine. But I have seen success for women that have thyroid issues. And again, speak to your doctor about this, about doubling the dose with levothyroxine or any other herbs that are helping you during your pregnancy for at least the first trimester, so that hormonally you're kind of set up and the pituitary gland is happier. For those women that have high estrogen, maca can be helpful. Maca helps to lower estrogen. Also,
I just asked you two questions. Where
yeah,
can I go to get a hormone panel done?
your primary doctor can refer you to labs.
Okay.
Yeah, and some acupuncturists actually can also prescribe labs as well.
Okay. And the thyroid is also a regular lab
It
test.
is a regular lab. Yeah.
Great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can ask for it.
Okay. Great.
Absolutely.
So muscle
Um,
for high estrogen.
oh yeah, high estrogen. Take your maca. Another thing I was going to recommend is to get ovulations test strips, and also do something called a BBT, or basal body test. And it's easy to do. You can get a chart. The only thing is you just have to be a little bit religious and committed to doing it at the same time, early in the morning. First thing you do, just keep your thermometer right by your bed so that you can pop it in your mouth before you even move, because moving will even bring up your temperature by zero point 0.5 or something like this. So you want to do it right away and at the same time every morning. And then you'll know after a while where you're having your ovulation, and also if you're having a long enough luteal phase. And the luteal phase is after ovulation, and you want to have at least 12 days for that fertilized egg to implant, because a lot of people have really short luteal phases, and that egg just doesn't have enough time to actually settle in and make a home. So
Mm.
that's the other thing I would recommend. You can also tell a lot of things by your cervical mucus. Um, you know, definitely, I'm happy to chat about that, but that might be a little bit of a tangent. But if you have like egg white consistency, that's where you're really ovulating. So you'll know when you're actually ovulating. That's the other thing that I find is people are assuming that their ovulation is happening mid-cycle, and maybe it's happening day 7, day 10.
Yeah.
So just to kind of, if you are trying to get pregnant.
Yeah, I
That's
did a natural family planning course with a local energy medicine healer here when I think like my son's first year of life. So when I was breastfeeding, it was actually really hard to do the basal body temperature because I was constantly moving and breastfeeding around the clock.
mm,
But what was, I think, most potent about the course was learning about my cervical fluid. And
mm,
for me as a woman, most of my life I was like, what is this stuff that this like clear fluid that's between my legs a lot of the month? Nobody had taught me. I mean, it's just mind-blowing to me, and it feels really disempowering that I spent most of my life in the dark about parts of my body and the cycle, our very natural cycle. So that for me was the most important part of this course, was learning about my cervical fluid and how I can chart even without doing the basal body temperature, because like I said, I was breastfeeding. Just being so aware of my cervical fluid and what it looks like, the texture, how sticky it is, all of that is so indicative, like you're saying, of our ovulatory cycle. So I highly recommend. It just feels so empowering to know that about myself as a woman, that this is just a natural part of it. And as I'm raising children, I'm raising a boy. He sees blood in my pants and in my underwear and the toilet every month, and I want to teach him these things. And I'm hoping that the girls, I don't know what he's going to choose when he grows up, but he'll still have girlfriends regardless of what he chooses. And I want him to have that awareness. And I hope he won't have to teach it. I hope they'll be really aware and that their parents have taught them. And I just recognize where we are, like, wow, I'm 41, and this has only been the last few years that really this has come into our collective awareness of what all these things are and what they mean to us and to our health, to our most vibrant health as women. So I just want to
yeah,
share.
absolutely. And thank you for offering, because I don't have any children. And so thank you for offering the mama's perspective of what's realistic, right?
Yeah.
Because I think the other thing that gets really just taxed is our stress level around, if we are trying to get pregnant, that pressure that we feel of doing all the right things and da. So just do what you can, but that your body is giving you these messages and you have all the information that you need, if you learn to decode what's going on. I think that's really cool, that distinction. So there's 3 other main causes, and another test that I would have run is something called an SHG, and I think it stands for a sonohystereogram, and this is a non-invasive procedure. It doesn't use any contrast dye or any radiation, but basically they're filling the fallopian tubes in the uterus with a fluid so that they can see the structures if there's any blockages, because that's another common cause. It might be a silent cause. You may have no symptoms or pain or anything like that, but you might have some kind of blockage in the fallopian tubes. You might have large uterine fibroids or cysts. And those, I have seen women, and in 3 or 4 months, not only do they have more regular cycles and not as heavy and all of that, but their cysts and their fibroids have shrunk or gone away. And so just herbs alone are really amazing, but I would highly recommend pairing that with acupuncture to help move the blood and get it more smooth, and also to regulate the liver, which can cause a little bit of stagnation in our energetic system. So like you said in your example, you got headaches and that kind of maybe even irritation, things like that. Those are all kind of livery symptoms. You might have indigestion, or where you have alternating looser stools and then kind of like goat pellety ones. That's the liver not flowing smoothly, and the liver is in charge of moving energy and blood through the body. So we want to make sure that that's happy.
Yeah, I find that during, and I still do, is that it's actually during my ovulatory cycle when I have a lot of indigestion. So I'll feel like really gassy and uncomfortable. And so what I'm hearing is that that's indicative of some liver blockage.
If it's just more gassy and bloating, it could be more of a spleen needing to be boosted kind of thing. So yeah, and the spleen is also really another important organ when it comes to reproduction. And also for mamas that have already had children, because as you know, Kara, things tend to drop during pregnancy. You're using a lot of your chi to allow a baby to come out, and with that chi, sometimes the uterus prolapse itself, or you get hemorrhoids, or you might start to bruise more easily after that, or even have heavier cycles. So all of those things, including the gas and bloating and that kind of stuff, is the spleen not being able to hold what we call the upright chi in the body. It's kind of like the energy that works against gravity. To also, if you have genetic causes to miscarriage, there's a formula called Bujang Yichitang that you can take very safely throughout your cycle that's going to help with the spleen's energy of lifting up and all those other symptoms that we just mentioned. So that's another thing to check out. What's that?
What's the name of that herb again? Bucha?
Well, it's a formula, and it's called Bujang Yichitang. And again, I wouldn't take it unless, you see an herbalist and they're like, yes, that's your formula.
Got it.
Yeah. So that's another structural or anatomical thing, is genetics. Have that tested. And if you are genetically prone, that formula can be super helpful. Going back to the SHG, there could also be some kind of scar tissue that's present. Those of us who have had abortions or IUDs or anything like that, again, herbal medicine can be awesome at kind of cleansing out the uteral lining, and then we go back and build it back up. That test can also show a misshapen cervix or uterus, an incompetent cervix. All of those things, I would definitely just make sure you rule them out. And that just makes things kind of like easier in the mind, right? At least we know what it is.
Yeah, I definitely have a tilted uterus. And I think early on in my first trimester with my son, we realized that I did have an ovarian cyst. I think I was 37. So yeah, I was at that more advanced maternal age, as they say, and these are fairly common. But I still had a really healthy and enjoyable pregnancy. So these things don't mean that we can't go on to procreate, healthy children as well.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. Um, Another thing that I would have tested is homocysteine levels. And this is another thing that would kind of be a silent cause. And it's one of those that you can easily get tested for to just see if your levels are 10 or above. You're going to want to eat more folic acid. Folic acid will help to thin the blood and reduce clotting factors. Even taking a good prenatal vitamin with enough foresight is really helpful for that. So not a death sentence in any way.
What was the name of that? Homocysteine?
Homocysteine.
Cysteine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I take a raw prenatal vitamin, and those were all really great. And we don't even have to be pregnant to take these, right? Mm-hmm. So it could be you're just trying to, like you're saying, Simone, you're wanting to up your folic acid and just increase your overall uterine health and other health. So we don't have to be only pregnant to take these.
Yeah. It's always good to juice up the system as much as you can before you get pregnant.
Yeah, right.
And because you're just going to feel better the whole time too. And then the final reason that, again, could be a silent reason that you might want to get some genetic testing, and also just see if you have any immunological disorders. This is more rare. This is kind of similar to an organ transplant, if your body would reject that kind of thing that it would see as foreign. So it might attack the egg, sperm, or fetus, and that can be tested beforehand. This is one of those pregnancies you would want to plan, and the way to go about it would probably be to go on some immunosuppressant drugs and do that for a period of time right before pregnancy. So those are the main reasons. And like you said, with some foresight and some information and some body awareness, a lot of these things don't get in the way of having a healthy and viable pregnancy. And we can go through that experience super empowered and feel really great the whole time too. I think my biggest recommendation is, if you are a mama or a mama to be, just to have a 3-month window where you can really be embodied with the process. Make sure that everything is flowing really well. And if you have any doubts, then see a specialist that can help you with these screenings, just so that you rule any other things out. And then if anything, I would say the other silent thing is stress level. And just the amount of pressure that can be had during this whole process, and finding a way to really just love yourself and be compassionate and find self-care and self-love with the whole process. So
yeah, I know for us in our experience, we were so new in our lovership, my partner and I. So it was really just about our connection when we conceived. We weren't trying to make that happen. We were open to it, and we had had an ongoing conversation because he knew I wanted to have children. He wasn't sure. He had already raised his stepdaughter and then was in the process of raising his teenage daughter. But it was an ongoing conversation. And again, we weren't trying to make something happen. It just kind of naturally happened as the result of, just this procreative act. Whereas with our last 2 pregnancies, I was very much trying to make something happen. And I'd almost come to be very utilitarian about sex. It was like, all right, it's that time, I'm
yeah.
let's go. And And so after this last miscarriage, which just happened this past fall, I just was really clear that I want to find that place again with my partner of our being lovers and our enjoying our sensuality and our sexuality and not trying to make something happen. And I also had a conversation with the universe because this last pregnancy, at the end, the embryo stopped growing at about 7 weeks, 6 days, but I carried it to the 11th week. So my body did start to create some placenta, which I also had to move through the process of passing during the actual miscarriage. But when I got the what is the scan again? What is it called? It's early.
Ultrasound?
Yeah, ultrasound.
Yeah. I know it's early for me too. I'm like, where's my
brain? The fetus showed some abnormal growth. And so, I've just had a conversation with the universe of like, if it's all in alignment, if it's in alignment with, a healthy being, simply because I'm open to love anyone, everyone. And I do have a 3-year-old. You just saw him, and, he is our priority, and I want to bring in another energy where it's all like we can all balance each other, and it wouldn't feel like a lot of energy would have to go in one direction. So just having a conversation with the universe about that, like, I'm open, if that healthy energy wants to come in, and we can, kind of all live harmoniously together, where we all work together and nobody feels like, they're losing time or energy with mama or papa or brother, then we're open. And that being said, so in the process of my moving through loss and the natural grief that comes with loss, right? Even though it's an embryo, and I kind of dance around the language because it's not technically a baby yet. It still has the tail, and it's not a fetus, at least for me in my first term miscarriage pregnancy losses. There's still grief, right? There's still a feeling of a lack of control, right? I might have had some dreams or ideas, especially of how my pregnancy would go, and then I'm losing it twice, really early in. So there's a lot of emotion and to work with. So I just kind of intuitively incorporated, which I've always done, the expressive arts, and really sharing my story with the wider community around me in moving through my own grief and my grieving process and my moving towards healing. So miscarriage does happen, and we can take all these steps, and we can, try to be the healthiest and the highest and best, and it still might happen. It's something we can certainly work to prevent, and it can be a healing medicine in and of itself. It doesn't have to be the end of the world. And I think we as women, as we're seeing this uncovering and this using our voices, we're realizing like, wow, 1 in 4 is a lot of miscarriage. And yet you don't really realize that you're a part of this club until all of a sudden you're in it, and you never asked to be in this club. So there can be some anger. I know it's for me, it's mystifying that we don't have this regular conversation around pregnancy loss, or even the idea that it doesn't mean anything, that because it was just an embryo, maybe just 7 weeks, that it didn't have any meaning, but 7 weeks had a lot of meaning. And I can work with that meaning. I can work with what's wrong, Buddha. So that's what, oh yeah. You do? Okay, can you be a little patient? I'm almost done here, okay? And I will help you. But we're not going to take anything out of people's hands. We're going to be kind and gentle. So, all that to be said, we can work within the process too of losing, and come to normalize even the experience of loss, especially as Americans culturally, right? We're really disconnected from death. We don't want to have any experience of it. It's something that is like set aside in the mortuary or at the cemetery. But for me as a woman, there's something so important of not just normalizing my menstrual cycle and blood, and how, like I said, I want to raise him to know that this is what it is, you know, and even if he chooses to be with men in the future, they might want to have kids. Like, everybody comes from a vagina, everybody comes from blood, and I do see that as part of our path as women, is normalizing these experiences, including loss. So I definitely created a ritualizing pregnancy loss course that just helps guide us women through our own healing journey with grief and moving through those 5 stages. And really claiming loss as normal, you know, as normal, as healthy, and giving voice to it. Because like I said, like, okay, it was 7 weeks, only 7 weeks, but 7 weeks can be, it's a lifetime, right? It was these 2 embryos that I carried, that was their lifetime. And I get to celebrate that. And it doesn't have to be something that I just drop in the toilet and flush away. It's something that, like, you know, we have pictures and they're on the wall, and they mean something, even if it wasn't a baby or a fetus. So, and it doesn't have to be that either, but it's just, there's so much potent for energy for healing within all of it. Yes, buddy.
And I love that. And I use the word process because, you know, it is a journey. And I think that it doesn't stop, you know, necessarily on our own terms, but would it be the journey if we could, like, plan the whole thing and have an end date? And, you know, I think sometimes in the surrender, things develop in a way that really blossoms to the highest potential it can be. And I think it's awesome when we can embrace all the phases of that journey of what's possible. And definitely loss is in there, and beginnings are in there, and, you know, the whole thing, the development, all of it. I think what you're doing is so revolutionary, and I think that the more that women can really be at voice and be in empowerment of their process, and not give themselves the double arrow of feeling any betrayal, guilt, shame, all that stuff that we can kind of layer on ourselves around our reproductive health, you know, the better. The more that you're going to be able to move through that into a next pregnancy with more grace. Yeah.
And, you know, it's okay if you give yourself 1 arrow. That awareness of, like, okay, you know, how can I be a little more compassionate and work with this, you know, and giving voice is that, right? Sometimes just saying to someone what we're really feeling. I feel guilty. I could have done X, Y, or Z to prevent this. That can just be such a healing part of the journey. Yeah. And I love
a community too, where you're not alone, you know, and you're with people that really understand it, that have gone through it or are going through it. I think that's huge, because I know a lot of women who have gone through it and just felt so isolated and didn't have anyone that could share enough space for the grief, for the anger, for whatever's coming up. And so I think that's also important to have your space, you know.
Yeah. Yes. So we started an online repository of tales of loss, so that we can go somewhere and we can, you know, find someone whose story is maybe similar to ours and just not feel so alone. Or we can contribute our own story, because it's so empowering, right? Just sharing it, letting it go, releasing it. As soon as we give it voice, there's a release. I feel shame. When I say that, there's so much release of the shame, whatever it's related to, you know?
Yeah, it's just coming up to be acknowledged and to just, it wants to heal itself.
Yeah. And that's the beauty, right, of this time. It can feel so overwhelming with everything that's being uncovered in the world. And yet we want to remember, like, that's the opportunity for growth and transformation, is when it stays hidden, even though we're not seeing it, so it might not feel as overwhelming, it's there. And we're not able to transform it and to work with it. So that's like the potential of this now, is we get to work with all of this raw material.
Mm-hmm.
And talking about menstrual cycle, I'm right here, buddy. I'm right here. It's so humorous that it's almost counterintuitive that we have to be talking about normalizing loss, because every month we are losing a healthy egg, right? That could have potentially become somebody. So loss is part of our monthly. It is part of our cycles.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've also lost like that rite of passage where we're really acknowledging what our cycle is when it first comes. Like I remember the first time I had menarche, it was almost like I was scared to tell anybody. I was like, oh no, what do I do with these sheets? Like, it wasn't celebrated or acknowledged for what it is. And like you're saying, it's an acknowledgement not only that we can step into this amazing role of procreator, but also it's the rite of passage in our acceptance of how life moves through things. And there's creation, there's destruction, there's loss, there's just change. A lot of change. And so I think the grace to which we embrace that, and we're able to flow with what's natural, what's kind of resourced appropriately and aligned, that's where we find our health. That's that balance, that dance in the balance of life and loss.
Mm-hmm. Especially when, one thing I like to say is, like, when we're born, we're given a life sentence. It's really a death sentence. We don't know when it's coming. We don't know when it's going to happen. That's one of the biggest mysteries of all, and we can't control it, and that's for everyone in our lives, everyone we love. So menarche offers us that opportunity to, again, work with it, right? Instead of fearing it. I know, I hear you, buddy. I hear you. I'm almost done. So again, just so exciting to find ourselves here and now. We get to reclaim all of this as natural. And buddy boo, you're just having a rough morning, huh? Attention. You say hi to Simone? No. Yeah, so I know that's like the world I want him to inherit. I want him to be surrounded by women who are empowered and understand the rhythms of their body and just the natural course of life that includes birth and death, and they have the tools to work with it.
Yeah.
All of it it can be a healing medicine. That's what my miscarriages has taught me. They've been profoundly healing, and offered me the opportunity to really, like, look at myself and how I've been moving through the world. In my first miscarriage, it was so clear what was up was around how I can embody some of the wounded healer archetype. So what I mean by that is that I can very easily give to others nurturance, loving care, attention that I can neglect giving to myself. And that's not what I want to model for him. I want to model for him, someone who, yes, does a great job at taking care of him by taking care of myself. I want him to see that. So I'm really grateful for each of my miscarriages, and there's just this deeper trust of the universe, and that that old adage of, like, things happen for a reason and we might not know why. So yeah, and I definitely feel like, I find myself today in a whole different, it's like 180 degrees. I was sharing with you, Simone, as we began, that I'm going through this transformation, and so much of it is around my own self-care, is of my having created and put into place systems that really support me. So like last week, I had my menstrual cycle and I tapped out. I've come to the place where it's like, I need to tap out when I'm bleeding. I need to lay down and rest. I read because that's what I enjoy doing. And give myself permission for that and know that like this external world is going to continue to be here and I can step right back in. And there isn't a loss, but rather the gain is massive when I can give to myself that way. And it might sound really privileged, and it is really privileged. And I do believe that we can come together and create this. That's why I've created this village space. We don't have to just have money to tend to our self-care, but we do have to have open communication and a willingness to help meet each other's needs. So I can talk more about, those systems and how to create them at a different time. But yeah, it feels so good to really own that that's the place I want to move forward from as an empowered woman, that my self-care is my priority and that there's nothing beyond me that requires my sacrificing my self-care. And that's like the food, making sure I get the food and the drink and the sleep. Sleep's a hard one. I mean, this past week's been a little rough and I have to come back to my boundaries with this one and like you stay in your bed and making sure that, I'm getting my needs met. Yeah. So,
yeah, definitely. I mean, when women come to see me about regulating their cycle or building it up if they have scanty cycles, a lot of women don't know that they're supposed to rest during their cycle. Some of them are running, 5 miles because that's what they do all the time. And, that definitely will tax the blood over time. So to know those rhythms and to acknowledge what you're saying, the cycle, there's no loss because it's always running back on itself. And that, observing those cycles and being in harmony with them is going to give to you tenfold and allow your body to do what it needs to do. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the world I'm excited about co-creating, is like not the one where we're just stepping into man's shoes and the way he's done it, but we're actually going to honor what we need. I need a nap every day. So in our household, we maintain the European siesta model.
Love it.
Yeah, and it's like 12 to 3, this is a quiet space, and I try to nap when I can. But if I can't nap, because sometimes my mind is running wild, I still lay down. It's imperative, and like I've got morning and I've got afternoon to do work and run errands and do the chores, but this is necessary and he needs it too. I'm getting off topic here, but I think it is related to our stress levels and to our self-care as women. But it's easy to get caught up and go do, but our children need to see us modeling this. I hear a lot of mamas saying, around age 2 they drop off the nap, and it's like, no, that's actually cultural. If you're to lay down with your child, if you're to slow yourself down, they will mimic that, So again, we're the empowered ones. We get to co-create the world that we want them to inherit. So what does that look like? And what does that require of us to create that?
Well, one thing from the outside in, Kara, that I so appreciate you is that, at least from the outside, it seems like you're always engaged with spirit as well. Like you're always kind of aligning yourself with what you see as a co-creative space. And to me, that's aligning yourself with spirit, because you don't see yourself as being punished for whatever is happening, or that these consequences are happening to you, but that you can, really design and allow for the space to have your life unfold and who you are to unfold as you are really choosing it. And I think that that's just as human beings, beautiful, and so necessary. And I think that you know, whenever we're talking about co-creation in general, you know, that we are in choice of a lot of the way that we process that up here and in our heart. And I guess one final thing, just from the Chinese lens, the Chinese medicine lens, that I can offer is, you know, in the vein of getting pregnant and what you were saying with stress and how that can really be a factor, there is an actual internal energy meridian called the Baomai that connects the uterus to the heart. And when our heart is in a place of being closed or just not able to really take in all the sensory or be in its own truth, the uterus also, at least in this theory, shuts down as well. So I do feel it's important to kind of connect to your deepest why in life, you know, and to kind of celebrate that and to be at choice and co-creative space with that. And the rest of life kind of will flow around it, I feel like. You know, that's always been my philosophy, and I love that you're creating spaces where there can be more mindfulness for all of us in what world we're co-creating. I hear you saying that, and I think that's really awesome.
Thank you. Can you spell that channel between the heart and the uterus again? How does you?
I think it's spelled Bai.
Bye.
Or no, maybe it's Bao. Bao. And then the second is Mai, Mai. Mai means channel. Yeah, pathway.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah. And so this is an ancient medicine, right? They've you know, been able to identify these meridian lines for over 2,000 years. Some books even say 5,000 years. And so this knowledge is very ancient. And, you know, I think sometimes in our Western society, we don't think about how emotions play into our life and how they affect our body. And our body is really, it's so cool because it's going to respond to whatever is really, truly going on for you. And it doesn't lie to you. You know, I treat people for all kinds of things, and you know, often their pain is coming up because there's this emotional thing, and I'll be like, hey, you know, is there something going on with a woman in your life or something like this, if it's manifesting on the left side, or is there something in the future that you're worried about? I mean, almost 90% of the time, that's the case. There's something that, like, as soon as it's acknowledged, that pain just goes away. Right. You know, and it's really looking for that piece of mindfulness. Yeah.
And I love what you're saying, because it's not, I think so often we want to know why. And I know for me, like sometimes with my emotional body, especially my connection to my intuition and my gut, where I'll just feel this like clear no. It's a clear like no. But then my mind will be like, I don't want to share it. There's almost a shutting down because I don't know why. And I mean, you can tell what I'm doing with my body here. Like there's not really a whole lot of room to grow or to expand, you know? And so that release of having to, you know, the why or the how, and just the like, okay, this is here. So there's, you know, some like I'm feeling.
Where do we go from there?
Yeah, just acknowledge.
How do we continue to co-create with what is, you know? Yeah,
and just giving voice to it. I experienced that with my son. I've been talking about, you know, this era of Me Too and some of behaviors that my son is perpetuating with rage and aggression. And it's like, as soon as I really speak it and then like welcome it and just say like, okay, you know, let's try to harness you, because your energy and energy is powerful and can be used for creation and or destruction, but let's use you for creation. As soon as I do that, it's like it just kind of dissipates, you know. It'll still show up, but it's amazing how healing it is, just that mindfulness of giving voice to it, and it can move. So thank you so much for this conversation today and sharing all your wisdom. And I appreciate all the work you're doing in the world and Source Empowered Wellness, what it offers to San Diego mamas and our pursuit of healthy bodies and raising healthy families and children. So thank you.
Thank you, Kara. I love having this opportunity with you, and definitely reflecting that I think your work is super important. I love what you're doing as well.
Thank you.
So glad we could chat, and I hope it was helpful.
Yeah, very, very helpful, I'm sure. I've taken some notes, so I'll put them in with the video, and then maybe Source Empowered Wellness. So do you just want to tell us how we can find you and your work?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me at Source, SOURCE, Empowered, EMPOWERED, wellness.com. And we're walking clinic. We're open Monday through Saturday, 9 to 1 and 3 to 7. So if you want to come, and our model is a little different because we treat multiple people in the same room so that we can lower the cost. So your visit is only $30. The first time it's $35.
Awesome.
And we are all about ease, so that's why we take walk-ins. Just come on in.
Awesome. I wish you were a little closer.
Yeah, we are in PB in Pacific Beach, but who knows? We'll open different locations in the future.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, Mama. Well, I'm going to close this. So we'll say goodbye here.